What is going on, guys? Animatic Ghost here today, and today guys I'm doing a vlog, something I have never done, and at the very start I have to apologise about the webcam because it is a bit shit, and I do realise I'm looking slightly off camera, but that is because what I'm talking about today I've written down. Now the topic today is very controversial from the outset. I may say things that might offend some of you guys, but I feel it is important to talk about this, regardless of the anger or the offence it might create. Now, the topic, as you can see from the title, is about Britain and the USA going to war in Syria and about whether we should or we shouldn't. I think I should start firstly with the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War as a prelude to the main topic, because it'll kind of outline my arguments and give you guys a picture of where my perspective of this comes from and why I believe what I believe. So anyway guys, starting with the Iraq War, from the British perspective, we went to war in Iraq in order to find and destroy weapons of mass destruction. Now, people will argue that it was to overthrow Saddam Hussein, which is a lie. The government's reason was supposed intel that showed Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Now, UN officials did in-depth comprehensive searches on several occasions around the whole of Iraq and found nothing. Yet both Britain and the USA insisted that they did exist. So Britain and the USA went to war, and the war took a long time, and many people on both sides suffered heavy losses. And I'd like to say at this point now that my sympathy goes out to their families. So we eventually overthrew Saddam Hussein, but we still did not find any weapons of mass destruction. So our basis for the war was actually a lie. So instead, in Iraq, what did we actually achieve? In my opinion, we achieved nothing except causing suffering on a large scale. Now, after the war, a lot of the Iraqi population resented us for invading their homeland. No matter which way you look at it, we invaded them. Some Iraqi people believe that the war and aftermath was far worse than the actual dictatorship of Saddam. And in some respects it was. What further makes the situation worse is that we tortured Iraqi soldiers and murdered those who surrendered. I will note that this was a small group of people, and it wasn't the whole of the army that did this. It was a small group of people from the British Army and from the American Army that for some reason did these terrible actions, which we tried to cover up, and unfortunately that failed. So anyways, now why was the Iraq War relevant to this video? Well, it enforces the fact that prior to going to war, we must be 100% sure that the reasons, or better to say, the grounds for war are real. It is one of them things where you can't justify invading another nation unless your base reasons for doing so were legitimate. And in this case, there is no evidence that this was actually legitimate. Therefore, we shouldn't have invaded them. Anyway, moving on to the Afghanistan War, which is technically a civil war dispute over land between the Afghans and the Taliban, which has been a long-standing problem for the nation, and we, by us, i.e. Britain and USA, backed Afghanistan and have been fighting over there, and we have been fighting over there for over a decade, if not longer. And in that time we have made little difference, but lost lots of good soldiers and good people. This is something these soldiers' families will never get over, and it can never be fixed. There is nothing in the world that will make this better for them. After all this time, we have now decided to pull out of Afghanistan, but yet the Afghans and Taliban are still fighting. So, if the reason was to stop terrorists or protect Afghanistan, then we have failed, and those soldiers died for nothing, which is insulting to their memories. By pulling out, we are saying their actions were worthless, and I think that realization is hard to consider, because so moving on to the whole Syria debate, the grounds for the conflict and intervening is that the Syrian government has chemical weapons and is using them on the rebel forces. The USA and British Army believe that this is wrong, and in that respect I would agree. But the whole problem is that there's been no proof so far that this is the case. Both the Syrian government and rebels blame each other for the use of these weapons. Currently, UN officials are trying to figure out the truth and are being met by opposition by both factions. Regardless of this, without proof, we will end up interfering in another civil war that does not concern us at all. I am not saying that letting people suffer is the right thing to do, but the United Nations was made to tackle these problems. The United Nations is designed to stop crimes against humanity and to also stop war crimes and bring people to justice in some way. Now, nothing gives us the right to decide another sovereign nation's future. That is for them to do. For some reason, Britain and America have concluded that they have the right to police the world, but I am sorry, we have no such right. If another nation tried to dictate Britain or the USA's politics and lifestyle, we would go crazy and fight to uphold our sovereignty. So why do we think that it is okay to do this to others? There have been civil wars in both our nations, and nobody has ever interfered. Now, there is another reason as to why we should not get involved in Syria. And the reason basically comes down to the function of an army. The reason people join the army is to protect their nation. This is the fundamental basis of an army. The army is what we turn to in times of great danger. The only time we should ever interfere outside of our borders is when the threat is directed to us. If we are threatened by another nation, then we should fight. But if there is no threat to us, we should not get involved. Our soldiers and their families should not have to suffer because our politicians want to get brownie points by getting involved in somebody else's war. This is not what our armies were designed for, and this is not what they should be used for. Politicians should do the politics, and the army should defend the people, not be their puppets and instruments to look better or get themselves another election. In no way is this video intended to offend neither the British or American forces. They do an amazing job that requires a lot of courage, dedication and honour. They deserve so much more respect and dedication than they get. No words can ever be enough to acknowledge their actions and sacrifices, and I hold them in the highest regard. I think it is time that the people of our nation stood up and said no to our governments interfering where we do not want them. It is unfair to put people in this position and to fight other nations' wars. Firstly, from a moral perspective, but secondly, from a financial one. Why should it be that we pay out all this money and have our nations fighting other people where it does not concern us? I've been Enigmatic Ghost. I know this was a controversial video. I have put quite a bit of time and thought into this, and like I say, it's not directed at our armies, it's directed at our politicians thinking that they can just interfere in everything and sacrifice our soldiers. Anyways guys, I will be back with some more videos and hopefully more cheery topics than this. Peace out.